morning. Welcome to Rising. It is Tuesday, and we've got a great show for you all today. Number of fascinating guests, fascinating topics, and we are just thrilled to be here, aren't we?
We are, as always, Robby.
As always. All right, let's get right to it.
Well, it seems a Biden impeachment effort is moving full steam ahead. House Speaker McCarthy has endorsed an impeachment inquiry into the president, telling GOP lawmakers last night it's the logical next step, an oversight leader's investigation into the president's alleged pay-for-play influence peddling scheme. The speaker is expected to go public with this endorsement as soon as this week.
Well, GOP lawmaker Nancy Mace butted heads with Caitlin Collins over the inquiry on CNN last night. Let's take a look.
The people deserve the truth and nothing but the
Isn't
truth.
it supposed to be the evidence that leads you to pursue impeachment and impeachment inquiry?
Well, that's what the inquiry is for.
But there's
to
already
get more evidence.
investigations. I think that's where people are confused because it's not like
but
there's
we don't
no
have
investigation
we don't
happening.
have Joe Biden's bank records yet. And so one way to do that, my understanding, would be through an impeachment inquiry. So if that's what gets us those bank records, then I'm going to support it.
Republicans in the Senate, however, are less keen on opening the impeachment can of worms. Per reporting in The Hill, Republicans are skeptical that McCarthy could even muster enough votes in the House to pass an article of impeachment and warn it would be quickly dismissed if it even got to the Senate, possibly without going to a full trial. The American people are split on party lines when it comes to a Biden impeachment, per a new poll. However, all in all, 56% of registered voters think such an impeachment inquiry into Biden would be a partisan political stunt.
The White House has pushed back vehemently against allegations of wrongdoing. Spokesperson Ian Sams wrote on Twitter this morning, quote, "Opening an impeachment inquiry despite zero evidence of wrongdoing by the president is simply red meat for the extreme right wing so they can keep baselessly attacking him." All right, what do you make of the politics of this first and foremost? It does seem like it's split, it's close-ish, but the majority of Americans think this would be a political stunt. Caitlin Collins does seem to be raising an interesting question of whether or not the inquiry is following the evidence or if this is a kind of a wild goose chase looking for evidence that will justify the inquiry in retrospect. And it seems like even Republicans, many Republicans in the House, aren't necessarily on board.
Sure. Let's be transparent and honest with ourselves. At this point, there is not enough evidence for an impeachment of Joe Biden. I think that's just basically facts. That doesn't mean there's no wrongdoing. It just means enough evidence hasn't been assembled. It is certainly the case that the reality of the Hunter Biden situation is a lot more complicated and fraught than I think anybody thought, or certainly than the mainstream media conceded at the get-go when the laptop story was coming out. And I do think we need to look much more seriously at any financial connections Joe Biden might have had there. We have to further investigate his claims that he had nothing to do with Hunter Biden's business and how well that stands up. That said, Republicans Republicans do need to pursue that because many of these House Republicans ran on and won representation in Congress by telling Republican primary voters that they are going to fully investigate this. But the incentives for House members and Senate members are different because House members often are running in very safe districts where they're really just the whole election is convincing the Republican primary electorate that you're going to do what they want. Yeah. Whereas this person in the Senate is representative of an entire state of a much more ideologically and actually partisan mixed coalition. So it's not surprising that they don't want to touch this as much.
Yeah, I mean, I also do think politicians have figured out ways to throw meat at the base in the district without needing there to be an actual impeachment inquiry. If there is a vote in the House, those people from districts where they think it will help them politically to say that they tried to fight and impeach Joe Biden can vote for an impeachment and go back home and tell their constituents that that's what they wanted to do, but oh well, they were hamstrung by Democrats and a couple of turncoat Republicans in the House, and that'll be what it is. So I don't know that that should be such the barrier for those people who want to go ahead with impeachment in terms of the tense conflict between McCarthy and some of the more conservative members of the House. I do wonder, though, if it is a kind of an apotheosis of some of the bad political choices that have been made by Republicans, or I shouldn't characterize them as bad off the bat, but this is the question. Was it a good choice to focus so much on criminalizing Biden, perhaps in retribution for the way that Donald Trump has been criminalized, to focus on some of these cultural issues like wokeness that have now almost entirely disappeared from public discourse? weirdly, given that we're in the middle of a heated Republican primary, even those candidates that have tried to make wokeness their signature agenda item, whether it's Vivek Ramaswamy writing the book Woke Inc. or obviously Ron DeSantis, those issues seem not to be playing as well anymore. And it does seem to be an ongoing conversation about how you can position yourself vis-a-vis Trump as someone who's inheriting his legacy. And it does seem like a lot of this Hunter Biden stuff is going the way of wokeness. Is that premature?
I think that might be premature. I mean, I think it's premature to write off wokeness as a motivating issue as well. I mean, maybe, but if you look at polls
Who's it working for?
Well, if you look at polls of all of the Republican candidates against Biden, they're even or a point up or more in Nikki Haley's case.
Well,
right?
against Biden, sure, but they have to get out of the primary first.
Well, they're all talking about wokeness. I mean, I think it's getting a little overly analytic to say, like, well, this person is emphasizing wokeness more and is not doing well. I mean, you're probably bringing up, like, the Disney DeSantis example.
Well, yes. I mean, all of those things seem to not have gotten much traction or airtime. I mean, look who came out ahead in the debate. Vivek Ramaswamy got the most media attention after the debate, and it seemed like part of that was because so many people were taking hits at him, so he got more airtime and was able to talk more. Part of that was because he was willing to take the Trump anti-establishment foreign policy line that no one else was willing to take.
Sure.
But the other story out of the debate was that Nikki Haley had the most in terms of raw gains in polls and points. And it had very favorable
but she's not exactly Miss Woke over there.
That's my point. That's exactly my point.
No, I mean, she is very anti-woke, and she...
Well, no. I think that the reason that she obviously was applauded out of the debate for taking a more moderate and in line with the American public view on abortion. And a lot of I was just watching a panel assembled to assess the debate performance, and people were pointing to the fact that they found her to have credibility and integrity for being willing to criticize her own party. As someone on the left, I feel that way about Democrats who are occasionally willing to say true things about Democrats.
Sure, I don't think. I mean, obviously, wokeness is a really hard and weird thing to define. I don't typically think, except in like the broadest terms, if wokeness is just or anti-wokeness is just social conservatism, I don't think a lot of people include abortion necessarily as among the woke issues. It's more about gender and race.
I'm not saying that gender is. I'm not saying it is or isn't a woke issue. I'm saying that she hasn't spent as much time on the debate stage or elsewhere hammering home that she's running for president to end trans kids or whatever it is. I do think that what has happened in the context of the primary is that people have started to focus on policy issues more than they have some of these cultural issues. And that has been to the detriment of some of the people who've decided to frame their whole agenda entirely around not policy. And I do wonder, again, whether this impeachment stuff is ultimately going to have much traction. And if part of the fact the part of the reason, rather, that so many Republicans don't seem to be that enthusiastic about impeaching Joe Biden is, one, a lack of evidence. Remember, we did have a Donald Trump Justice Department for 4 years champing at the bit to do exactly this kind of investigation, and came up with the exact level of low evidence that we have today. And two, the fact that it's just a political non-starter compared to some of the other things that are motivating the public.
What's a political non-starter?
Talking about these non-policy related issues like wokeness and like impeaching the president.
Well, I mean, those are two very different things. There are parts of wokeness that don't have an obvious policy component, I agree, and I think the Republican Party has struggled with that a little bit, that beyond people's kind of visceral disagreement with, like, not having a women's sports team, or having women have to compete with people who might have biological advantages who are still being characterized as women. Right. What does the federal government do about that? Maybe not that much. Although it's not nothing, to be fair. You keep describing this as like a non-policy issue. I mean, Title IX and the Education Department and federal funding for schools absolutely does have a significant policy component. It's a little bit granular, a little bit detailed, and I'm not sure it's the most important thing for them to be talking about on the debate stage. But there are policies.
That's the point. That it's not the most. The public seems not.
Well, they could do a better job if they want to. They should connect wokeness to the actual policies of beginning with the Obama administration on Title IX related guidance to gender in schools and speak credibly about that. And I think these probably would be winning issues.
Look, as someone who is not rooting for a Republican candidate to be in the White House, I hope they follow that advice, because I don't think it's going to work out very well for them.
Well, we'll see. More Rising right after this.